Good day, everyone. We are going to start now. This is an event of the Alliance for Climate Action South Africa, which we can hear more about. But before I even say a word, I would like to welcome Mr. Gonzalo Munoz, who is part of the UN High-Level Champions team and was a champion for the Chile COP. So in the year running up to the Chile COP and the following year, he was the one of the two champions. And people might remember that the Chile COP actually took place in Madrid. So we are very honored that Mr. Munoz is coming to welcome us here and say what the role of the alliances is for the champions.
You want me to stand here? Should I stand here? Okay, thanks so much. It's brilliant to be here, and I will explain why is it so brilliant. Not only because of the session and the panelists, but also because of the topic and the region. The Alliances for Climate Action is definitely the best tool to implement climate action at a national level. And it's extremely important, I would say urgent, when it comes to the Global South. If you analyze the global climate action and who is speaking on behalf of the entities that are implementing, most of the time, I will be much more precise, more than 80% of those people have their headquarters in the Global North. And that is part of the diagnosis that we did in 2019. We were lacking in voices from the Global South, and we needed not only to have a capacity of listening to those voices, to learn from them, to understand what is happening in the communities, in the regions that are not only confronting the crisis, but also offering many opportunities, but also we need the solutions to land much rapidly in those sectors. We will not solve the crisis only with solar farms in California and electric vehicles in Japan. We will solve the crisis, and I will quote Sheila Patel, when the poor women of the Global South let us know that we did the good job. So in order to do that, the Alliances for Climate Action represent not only a brilliant tool, it's a tool that is now part of the Glasgow Pact. In order to fulfill the Paris Agreement, the high-level champions, the climate champions team, the Marrakesh Partnership, were asked by the parties to implement more and stronger alliances for climate action. Actually, today, the only ACA that we have in Africa is the South African one. We are depending on you people to show that from South Africa, there's so much that the world needs to learn, that South Africa is ready for receiving all of the capacity of implementation, not only for the well-being of South Africa, but the whole continent. Of course, we are really happy with Ricardo and the Global ACAS team that now we have more countries, now including Kenya, and a few days ago, the Emirates, that are now ready for launching their ACAS, but we need much, much more, not only in terms of numbers, but mostly in terms of impact. The possibility of an ACA is immense. It's related to the metrics and the impact that you can and must deliver. It's the influence that you are capable of creating towards your own government. You have the capacity of either pushing for higher ambition and at the same time be the best partner of the implementation of the NDC. But also you have the capacity of, while bringing those capacities together in South Africa, mostly municipalities and businesses, right? Well, we need also to bring more NGOs, we need to bring the academia, we need to bring the financial institutions, we need all of them in for the sake of a better South Africa, a better climate policy in South Africa, and the best metrics for the continent. So I'm really pleased to be opening this session, but mostly pleased on being available for the South African ACA. to be the best example of how we fulfill the Glasgow Pact and we implement the regionalization of the Marrakesh Partnership starting in your country. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Our event is more bright because of your presence. Thank you. So our Alliance for Climate Action in South Africa, as Gonzalo said, is businesses and cities. So it's action by subnational government and real economy actors. So as much as global negotiations that we hear for today are important, so is, you know, the action by those actors from below in line with the Marrakesh Partnership agenda. So today's event, we're going to look at circular economy approaches by some of our members. And also, we're very happy because it's a global network of alliances. We are in 10 countries now. We're very happy to also have a sister alliance, the Alliance for Climate Action from Mexico. One of their members is also here today. So, you know, we know that it's important to decarbonize our economic sectors, and a lot of attention is paid to that, and rightly so. But we also have to lighten our footprint overall and look at changing our patterns of production and consumption. And that's why the IPCC assessment report number 6 talks about circular economy initiatives being a very important part of getting us to stabilize at 1.5 degrees global warming and get to net zero emissions by 2050. So, you know, we really have to think differently about how we consume and how we produce things, how we get those goods around. So that is why our focus today. So I would like to introduce the panel, and I'll start with Perla Martinez. She is from a university in Monterrey in Mexico, She's teaching me to pronounce properly, which is the Tecnológico de Monterrey. And she is their sustainability lead and has some very exciting initiatives to tell us about. Then there is Mariki Brown. She is from a company called CHEP, which is a business-to-business company in the logistics sector. And she is, now I must look at my notes because she got a long title. She's responsible for government affairs. And Mariki, what else?
Hello, everyone. Sustainability and government affairs for India, the Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. Thanks.
Thank you. And then Mr. Hiten Palmer is the director of Uyilo e-mobility in South Africa, which is an initiative. We have a state agency called the Technology Innovation Agency, and they have the program that he's the director of, which is looking to accelerate and roll out the uptake of electric vehicles in South Africa. And so today, from the circular economy side, he's going to talk to us about what about the batteries. And then Ms. Kudani Mulautsi, she is a city engagement person for C40 cities in South Africa. And she specifically works with a big economic hub city, the city of Johannesburg. She works within that city to help them implement the climate action plan that C40 cities helped the cities develop. So 5 of our Alliance for Climate Action South Africa members are the big 5 cities in South Africa, and Johannesburg being one of them. So want to actually start with transport. And Hiten, I mean, it is very clear that to solve the emissions from the transport sector, we have to go to electric vehicles. Even in South Africa, where, you know, our electricity is still heavily coal-based, nevertheless, coal-based electricity is better than, even coal-based electricity is better than combusting petrol and diesel. And ultimately, you can clean up the electricity. You can move fast to renewable energy, whereas you can never clean up petrol and diesel. So it's very clear we've got to go there. And but, you know, this transition to a low carbon and climate resilient economy doesn't come without its own challenges and trade-offs. So we know that batteries have a big footprint, and, you know, what are we doing what is that footprint? What is the problem with the batteries, and what are we trying to do in South Africa about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, and good afternoon to everybody here and virtually as well. Yeah, so I think, you know, on the uptake of electric vehicles, we see that that will also be contributing and have an impact on the batteries and what to do with that. Fortunately, what we all seeing is that battery technology is radically improving. So what we're seeing as well is that the age of the batteries is being delayed until they actually end up for repurposement. Through that, we're seeing that the technology is radically improving, and what the replacement life cycle is actually being extended. But within the value chain, it's actually the automotive manufacturers now have set up a new business unit called energy business units within all the manufacturers. Within that, they're actually now providing renewable energy, they're providing charging infrastructure, and they're also maintaining the battery life cycle within that. So within the value chain in circular economy, we have the applications of reusing the electric vehicle batteries for grid support in terms of that. Then you've got the application of repurposement, taking those batteries, repurpose them for example, two-wheelers, storage backup systems in your home and other systems as well. And then your fundamental end of life is actually recycling. What's been great to see is that we've seen radical improvements in recycling technology. Previously, possibly about 5 to 8 years ago, the recycling rates were about 40% recovery in terms of recycling lithium-ion batteries. Today, we up to 96% recovery rates from lithium-ion batteries. So what does that mean? We can recycle batteries at their full end of life and use their recovered materials to remanufacture batteries. So what we've seen, there's immense pressure coming into the manufacturers on really closing the loop for recycling in terms of that. We can't really be pushing EVs as a sustainable product when the supply chain and end of life chain is not sustainable from that perspective. So pressure is also rising to source sustainable sourcing and manufacturing and mining as well of the batteries. So as much as we would really like the switch off today and switch on tomorrow for full sustainability, we see this as evolution that's evolving in terms of that. So we're seeing also the battery plants themselves are also being powered by renewable energy. We're seeing critical pressure on ethical sourcing of minerals for battery production. So it's an evolving process, and I must commend the automotive industry and the energy industry as well, radically taking that leadership in terms of moving that. And I think on a final note, what's critical is government's enabling environment through that. So fortunately in South Africa, we had the launch of the Extended Producer Responsibility Regulation in 2021, which really forces every importer, manufacturer and distributor of all electronics waste, including batteries, to manage the full life cycle of that product from cradle to grave. So what that means is that batteries are actually banned from landfill as of August, and that both lead acid and lithium-ion batteries need to be sustainably managed. So this is now from a regulatory perspective, putting the pressure on everybody to really comply in end-of-life management. So we're in an interesting position from that perspective, but we can really say that the technologies radically evolve, that electric vehicle batteries will not be a hazard to the environment. There are certain business models and use cases around that to manage that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hiten. Does anyone want to ask any questions of Hiten? Yes.
how many times can the batteries be reinserted in the cycle? How many times can they be recycled?
Are there any other questions?
Yes, you mentioned that 96% it's being recycled. I'm just curious, it's a great number. I'm just curious about the other 4%. What happens to that? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Hiten.
Okay, so on the question of how many times it gets recycled, it's also dependent on the chemistry of the battery and the manufacturer of the battery as well. But what we're seeing is, so obviously you've got the reuse, so you take the battery out and then reuse it in that instance, or you have the opportunity, if once you've tested the battery, once it's come out, you can then utilize. So let's say there's a number of 100 cells in that battery pack. Maybe once they've tested it, 80 of those are good and 20% not so good. You can take those 80% and reuse them. We're still seeing what is the usage of that. It just depends on what they're being used for. If they're being utilized in a bicycle, for example, the energy requirement is a lot less and you'll extend that life. If you're using it for home support, for storing solar energy, it might be a little bit more, and then you might extend that. So it's a use case perspective, but we're seeing that it's actually what's called a second life. So when we say about 12 to 15 years in their first life in the car, it's possibly another 10 to 12 years in their second life. And we're also hearing even third life that's coming in terms of the way they start using for power electronics, such as drills and other sort of things that have low energy use cases, but that's evolving from that perspective. So I think what's nice to see is that, and that also is from a cost perspective, because you're seeing batteries that come in electric vehicles are premium products and well-branded products. But then in the recycled economy and circular economy, you have the opportunity to access those batteries, which are a lot cheaper than what you would buy them in new, but still have the energy requirements to use in other cases as well. So it's a great concept that's being utilized from that. And what we see as well is a huge opportunity for developing economies that can start repurposing and embracing the circular economy to utilize these end-of-life batteries in closing the loop and providing energy access, mobility access for communities and bridging them into that. So that's it. On the second question about the 4%. So obviously, you know, within any technical process, you've got a byproduct of waste in terms of that. So what I highlighted initially, that the technology of recycling initially was only 30% recovery, and it's radically evolved in terms of that. And I'm sure it'll get to 99.9% in terms of that. So my highlight in that was that technology in recycling is radically improved, that we can actually recover, you know, 96% of that, and it will evolve to that. So obviously the manufacturing process and extraction processes, that's where the some of the efficiencies on the 4% come into it in terms of the process of that. But it's a growing space. There's a lot of investment that's going into it. The US government is strongly pushing in this specifically in developing the technologies, as well as Australia for that. And what they're really doing as well is pushing recycling, because they want to be less reliant on the finite resources, on minerals in the ground. And if we can start closing the loop on recycling and improving that whole life cycle and the technology in recycling, we then can be less dependent on the raw materials. So it's an evolving space, very interesting as well to see what's coming out of that space. And I think what was also interesting to see is that it's expected that recycled material is expected to fetch a higher price tag from a supply chain than raw material from the ground. So that's the economic side that's also changing.
Why, Hiten?
So it's also pressure on closing the loop on circular economy.
I see.
So forcing it there. So like we
Yes.
have the instruments as well from Polluter Pay, you know, enforcing that. They're now trying to say that we'll fetch a higher price tag for material that's recycled, and then using that into that. So
Okay, that's very interesting.
yeah.
But you're still not answering what is at the moment happening with the part that isn't being reused or recycled.
So
Just going to landfill?
So that's been banned now. So that's where it is. The pressure is rising. So in the case of batteries, you've got not only the cell chemistry, you've got all of the other components that get recycled, and that's where it gets utilized. So the copper gets extracted, aluminium gets reutilized from everything else, and that's what's now being implemented all over the world as well. And now with the regulation being passed of the EPR in South Africa, that is now all government and all the stakeholders are all coming together so we can start implementing that. But what's great to see is that we've already enforced a regulation to ban landfill. So whoever is caught in not obliging with that is subjected to imprisonment or a fine. So that's where it is.
That is fantastic. And did you play a role in getting this regulation passed?
So there was consultation with various stakeholders, but yes, certainly alongside the e-waste community and e-waste of South Africa, we played a role in supporting that development.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, you know, one of the issues around the transport sector is it's actually what I do in my day job is I work on transport, low carbon transport. So, you know, the energy part of transport is one piece of the picture of the sustainability of the sector and the decarbonization of the sector. But as important is, you know, we've got to avoid shipping goods all around the world. Sorry, Mariki. And we have to avoid traveling so much all around the place ourselves. We have to shift modes from high carbon to low carbon modes. And then we have to do the technological improvements such as the EVs. But so the logistics piece of the puzzle for freight movement is a very important piece of, you know, how do we make that have a lighter footprint? And Mariki has a very interesting business model, which I don't think anybody really understands, Mariki. So please start by just telling us, what is CHEP?
That's a fantastic place to start, Louise. I always say CHEP is probably the biggest business that you've never heard of before. So the reason for that is we are a business-to-business operator, and we own the world's largest pool of reusable packaging. So we have over 500 million assets globally. That's
Mariki, what is an asset? I mean, don't use your own jargon. What are those things?
Thank you for keeping me on my toes, Louise. So our assets are our pallets, crates, and containers that form the invisible backbone of the supply chain. So before I get chattest for the jargon again, let me break it down into an example. I find it's easiest to understand when we take a very tangible example. So for example, the humble tomato. Let's start with the tomato. So in some African countries, tomatoes are still harvested and packed into bags at the farmer. From there, it's shipped through to a producer, and by the time it gets to the point where it needs to be changed into tomato sauce or something else, half the packet of tomatoes is already squashed. So there's a lot of food waste in a supply chain like that. And that is one of the areas that CHEP steps in. So our reusable crates are used by farmers to package the tomatoes more safely. That is then moved to the next point within the supply chain. Let's say these tomatoes are being canned. So after it was canned, the canned tomatoes can then be packed on a pallet and taken to your nearest distribution center, from which it then gets shipped to the retailer. But there's another option, an even more efficient option. And this is where CHEP really starts to play a role in creating the leanest, most efficient supply chains. So from the farmer in a crate, beautifully preserved, to the canner. After the tomatoes have been canned, we can place those cans directly on an in-store solution, so onto a half-sized pallet that then goes to the distribution center and does not need to be repacked. It moves directly into your storefront from there, which means there's fewer touch points, there's fewer examples of waste, the food is being preserved better, and overall your supply chain is more efficient, which means carbon reductions for every part of that supply chain. And that's what we want to achieve.
Now, Mariki, Mariki told us a wonderful story yesterday over dinner about these pallets. So the pallets are made from wood, among other materials, I think, and they are a highly sought after commodity by criminals. So they have a special color blue that marks their pallets. And Mariki, please tell us about the criminal economy around your pallets, because this is a fascinating story.
So there is a black market for pallets. And because CHEP pallets are made from A grade in South Africa, it's pine from our own timber forests. It means it's really good wood and it's very sought after. So a big part of our business is ensuring that the assets that belong to us are returned to us. Because without closing that loop, the circularity of the business does not exist and the sustainability goals cannot be reached. So it's very important for us that our assets always belong to CHEP. They're never sold, they're never given away, and they must always come home at the end of the day. So they go out to customers, they get used on a rental model, then they come back to our service centers, we inspect them, we take out the broken pieces and replace only the planks and blocks that need to be replaced, and then send them back out into the supply chain, meaning that there's very little waste at the end of the day. The wood that we do need to replace is never landfilled. Our product waste gets taken care of from a recycling perspective. And that is one of the reasons that we can have ambitious sustainability goals, including very ambitious climate targets, because we protect that circular economy model. The circular economy for us is the starting point, which means our ambition is to stretch ourselves even further. And that's where the concept of regeneration comes in. Our focus is to ensure that we put more back into nature, into communities, and into business than what we extract. So overall, our big ambition, our big vision is to pioneer the world's first regenerative supply chain. So supply chains that don't extract, but rather put more back in than what it takes out.
So she didn't tell you the exciting part, which is where they would travel around the world and they see behind some gate piles of their pallets. And then they get the police and they raid the criminals and they take their pallets back.
Theft is theft, be it pallets or be it something else. So it's CHEP owned, it belongs to CHEP, and it must return home at the end of the day.
So I mean, I think that is the fantastic circular economy part of it, is that you're not just sending your pallets one way and throwing them out. They come home and work again and work again. So, you know, when I started work in the transport sector, I worked with the transport trade union, TAWU. And the workers in that union said to me that one of the perverse things about freight movement is that you will have a truck returning empty. So is there anything that CHEP is doing so that when your pallets come home, they are working on the way home?
Absolutely. It all goes back to those efficiencies that we discussed. So if we think about the amount of data that CHEP sees from a global perspective, you can imagine over 60 countries, millions of assets floating around. Our customers are at every point of the supply chain. We really do have access to big data. And one of the things we noticed with these big data sets is that our customers have the ability to help one another, and our customers and ourselves have the ability to help one another. So we have a program called Zero Waste World, which is very active in Europe and North America, and starting to become more active in other regions as well, as we innovate and pioneer within this space. And what that program does is it uses big data technology to analyze all these different flows and find efficiencies for our customers and for ourselves within the transport sector. So when we are looking at customer to customer initiatives, we aren't in the process at all. Our customers' trucks take care of one another and ensure that there's no empty transport miles between the customers themselves. Then there's also a customer to CHEP initiatives that also take care of empty transport miles. And this is where we actually use our customers' backhaul to bring our pallets home again, meaning that those trucks will not be running empty and will not be sending an additional truckload of pallets back to a service center. but rather you combine those two flows. And at the end of the day, this really does save thousands of kilometers in empty transport miles. And it's a really great way to pioneer in this space. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And we're constantly pushing the envelope on this, but it's something that really has potential to change how we look at transport miles. One of the examples that I want to bring from South Africa specifically. So the South African model is absolutely amazing. In South Africa, CHEP owns 18 timber farms, which are all FSC certified and managed by the most amazing forester. And from our own forests, we take logs through to our sawmill, where we then make the pallets for the South African market. One of the simple innovations that our operations people on the ground realized is just let your pallets stand and air dry for 6 weeks longer, and suddenly you'll save 30% in weight on your trucks. So we have seen a massive reduction in our carbon emissions based off of just that initiative. And it really is an exciting example from South Africa, and one that we are very proud of.
Thank you, Mariki. So I indulged Mariki with lots of time because I am so fascinated by this. So maybe there are questions that people have. And I don't know if there are questions online as well, because this is a hybrid event and maybe there's online questions. So I note a question here, and then no online. Okay.
Thank you. I think thanks a lot for very insightful discussion. Can I link back to presenter first? First is like the business model that CHEP is provided, service-based business model. And the first EV is like ownership business model. As a consumer, I need, like, we need to buy electric vehicle, and what happened with the batteries and end of life vehicle. I need to take the responsibility, not the owner, the manufacturer. So that's the differences when it says service-based modeling in circular economy business, because you have put best timber so that you can take care of the longevity as well as ensure the best service to the consumer. So the first question to you is, do you have any plan to have this business model or packaging the service that you are providing? You are providing business to business, but have you any plan to business to consumer as well? Like as a consumer, there's a packaging that actually can tap into your, the service that you're providing. This is the first question. Sorry, it's a long question. Second is any plan for EV to go for not ownership based, that is my understanding, ownership based model rather than the service based model, so that manufacturer can take care of the responsibility, whatever they're providing in terms of batteries or materials they have.
Thank you. So I think let's answer that first. So Hiten, do you want to talk about this idea of instead of owning the electric vehicle, that electric vehicles become a service?
Yeah, there's amongst the disruption with the technology, there's also disruption coming in from the end users, the customer, because the customer now is in the newer generation, don't want to buy a vehicle, they rather rent it or as and when they need it. But also in the vehicle as well, we're seeing different countries, and that's always the negotiations internally within every region that take place within that. It's also the electricity utility is also considering to also invest into the battery, because what's called vehicle to everything, the utility and municipality can also make use of the battery to support the energy network as well. And that's really on a country per country basis. But we've seen, like US, for example, certain models are available that you actually rent the battery because the battery is 40 to 60% of the price of the car, and you have those ownership models. So it's really region specific in terms of those ownership and also business models in terms of that, how the batteries get utilized within the vehicle, who pays for what, and also what happens after that as well. So it's a shared model from that perspective, and it's also region specific.
Thanks, Hiten. I'm actually going to answer for Mariki. So no, CHEP is not thinking about getting into the consumer facing space, but that is a wonderful business model for somebody else who's an entrepreneur to think about. Then we had a question here.
Hello, I'd like to ask from a bioeconomy perspective, you were talking about biological resources. In Jalisco, Mexico, we have a large problem with tequila production. That's where all the tequila in the world is produced, Jalisco. And most large tequila manufacturers have decided to switch into circular bioeconomy approaches. However, 20% of the tequila world production is produced by small manufacturers who don't really have the means to use technology or to adopt different technological approaches for their transition. And of course, the cheapest is always to dump the byproducts, which is tequila vinases and vagas, into streams. And there's a lot of anaerobic decomposition and methane production. So this really has been the largest problem in Jalisco for the last decade for the sector, because this is their means for living. However, there haven't been many supports from the government for them to switch with new technologies, but there hasn't been either much regulation or vigilance on them. So what would be your suggestions for this smaller scale producers who don't really have so many options?
So I'm actually, I've been very rude because I haven't asked people to introduce themselves. So do you mind to introduce yourself, sir and sir? Because I think that's part of the richness of the alliances, is that we have all these very interesting different people in the room.
Yeah, Sebastián Gradilla, research professor at Tecnológico Monterrey in Jalisco, mostly focused on technological approaches for circular economy.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Atik Zaman. I'm a senior lecturer at Curtin University, Western Australia, and I work in circular economy space. So it's really interesting to hear.
Do I make my question?
Yes,
Okay,
and introduce
yes.
yourself.
I'm Andrea from Peru, and I have worked with artisanal fishery communities and environmental education. So my questions, I'm going to be quick. I just want to know how you manage traceability and how do you assure fair payment along all your supply chains? Do you use blockchain or another type of technology to have that? And that's all. Thank you.
Okay,
So
great,
Mariki,
thanks.
answer this one first and I'll take that one.
Okay, no problem. So that's a really great question. And technology is so core to innovating and moving forward. So though we don't lean on the blockchain right now, it's not something that we'll exclude in future. Traceability is extremely important to us. And we have an innovation center based out of the States where we test our different products and our different new ideas. So out of that center, we're testing a variety of different models to be able to trace the pallets and embed a tracing mechanism into them when they go from us out into the supply chain. But for the pallets to get to us, one of the key things that we rely on is sustainability certification of the timber, because effectively most of our product is made out of timber. It's the pallet that's the core of our business. If we rely on PEFC and FSC certifications, and we work closely with our suppliers to understand their processes and their challenges, we have security that our pallets are 100% sustainably sourced at all times. And I have to say that includes the last year, which came with a lot of shocks, as we know, within the global north, and with supply chains being rattled and a lot of sourcing having to shift around. So absolutely, it's a non-negotiable for us, and our procurement team is absolutely fantastic at that. Being a multinational based out of Australia, we also have very high standards in governance and ethics, and we have to respond to the stock exchange in Australia. So it's all in our annual report. Everything's very clear, and it's a question that we welcome at any time to be challenged on those elements, and to give that transparency and that certainty to our customer of how the product that they use is sourced. Thanks for that.
Thank you. So on the small businesses, I think that this is a big challenge in every country. And we find that our Alliance for Climate Action South Africa has most of our members are small businesses, and we want to, develop a strategy as the Alliance for how to empower those businesses to be able to adopt some of these more expensive approaches. So it's work in progress. Noluthando.
Thanks, Louise. This was a comment online from Natasha. She says, there's a business model for stationary battery, not mobility leasing in South Africa already. Battery as a service using EVs in the Netherlands could certainly help South Africa's power grid.
Thank you. That's lovely to get that from the online. Okay, now I want to introduce Ms. Perla Martinez from Tecnológico de Monterrey, who is going to tell us what they're doing there, which is, so wonderful to hear from other countries as well.
Thank you, Luis. Well, just to say that Tecnológico Monterrey is a Mexican private university, multi-campus. We have over 26 campuses all around Mexico, and a community of students and the academia and researcher composed out of 100,000 people all around the country. What I'm going to do right now is share a couple of examples of circular economy initiatives that we have working on from Ruta Azul, which is our sustainability and climate change program. But as a university, we have several research groups that help industries and small producers, etc., to actually come up with solutions. But what I will be speaking is what we're actually doing in our campuses and around the area of our main campus in Monterrey. I will just want to say, like, to give a brief context of plastic pollution crisis in Mexico. I mean, obviously, it's all around us. It's a global crisis, but I do want to say some things that make it particularly difficult in Mexico, and that is that we are the 12th producer of single-use plastics all around the world, and we have a very large beverage industry actually based in Monterrey. So we have big producers. They have a lot of agency because they are organized in these chambers who actually lobby a lot against regulations such as the extended producer responsibility. So the result of that, I don't have the control of my slides, but if you can go to the next one, is actually that our recycling rates are very, very low. And we have examples like that all over our country, but that is very close to our campus in Monterrey. And that's where the first project that I will be speaking of is taking place. The project is called Arroyo Vivo, which in English means, I knew that was gonna happen to me. Which in Spanish means, in English, I mean, means living stream. But actually is one of the streams that are more polluted in the metropolitan area in Monterrey. And the main source of pollution, it's not surprise to anyone, are single-use plastics. So this is a community-based project. If you can change it to the slide, first slide, please. This is a community-based climate action, which is actually multi-sectorial, and the role of Tecnológico de Monterrey, it's being the leader of, that's okay, that slide's okay. It's being the leader of this initiative that was actually born out of the Alliance for Climate Action in Mexico. Before telling you the story of how the project was born, I would like to tell you what the project actually is. We are generating or creating a ecosystem regeneration model that goes in hand with the creation of a inclusive recycling model. All this is being applied, like I said, it's a community-based project, and we chose to have as location of this project Arroyo Seco, which is an urban water body that goes around our campus in Tecnológico de Monterrey, around what is called Distrito Tech, where in the surroundings areas, we are working towards building, it's like we call it like a living laboratory of what a sustainable city should look like to set an example. But this stream is mainly, or where it's more polluted, and this is not a surprise, is in Campana Altamira, which is a neighboring community, like right on the side of Distrito Tech, that has a very vulnerable community with a lot of illiteracy rates and high crime and domestic violence issues. So there, what we're doing is engaging the community. Some of this community was already working as what in Spanish is called pepenadores, who are people that in an informal way, like without having protection from legislation, work collecting waste and then selling it.
We also have it in South Africa.
You also
Yeah.
have that. So the project is based, or what we're doing is in the first stages, we're cleaning up the stream by using this big network of allies that we form. Like I said, this project was born out of ACA Monterrey, or the Alliance for Climate Action in Monterrey. And we received a co-funding from the National Organization of Atmospheric Agency in the US. So we designed the project. We were into grant processing, like to receive the funds. Then we have a co-funding from the foundation of one of the beverages companies, which is called Fundación FEMSA. And then we engage an NGO that is specialized in engaging with the community. So we have had several sessions. If you can go to the following slides, please. The following. This is just like to put you in a map, because maybe you might wonder why the US government will invest in a project in Mexico. And the reason why that is because, as you can see in this map, and you can see Monterrey in red light, we're one of the most generators and producers of waste that go firstly into Arroyo Vivo, into Arroyo Seco, then to another river, then to another river, then to El Rio Bravo, which in the US is known as El Rio Grande. So we are one of the most contributors of marine debris there. And this obviously ends up then in the Mexican Gulf. So we have been engaging the community, like speaking to them. They were actually pretty organized already, but some other activities that Tec de Monterrey together with governments have been making there. And one of the questions, well, so far, if you can go ahead to the next slide, we have three massive, like the first stages is to have massive cleanup sessions, where up to now, more than 300 people have participated from several universities, not only Tech, from several companies, from several local governments, actually cleaning up. But we are not, this is, like I said, it's the first stage. We are working with a methodology, which is called the Circularity Assessment Protocol, which is actually to map the traceability of the waste that ends up in the Arroyo Seco. And that is to map where and who is producing that waste and how it gets to the stream. So we can actually strategically identify that and offer solutions to avoid waste returning to the stream. And the final stage of that program will be actually to develop this recycling, inclusive recycling model where waste can be regarded as a means of living and economic development of that very underserved community in Monterrey. Maybe I can stop here and then I can go to what we're actually doing in our campuses, perhaps to receive questions from you or the audience.
So I am very interested in these informal waste pickers who are actually, I think, doing the most important work in the world for no money. So in South Africa, we have a Waste Pickers Association, which represents their interests. And I'm wondering whether you have such a thing there in Monterrey, or maybe it would be of interest to link up with the Waste Pickers Association in South Africa.
Yeah, there's no Waste Pickers Association, and actually that's something that we want to create within this program. The government of the municipality of Monterrey, it's part of our allies in this project. So they actually signed a commitment that they will work with us to change the regulation and formalize these types of associations. So I mean, the objective of that is waste pickers having good working and conditions with dignity.
Yeah.
Because they're actually now, like the legislation, it's like if you take the legislation like literally, it's illegal. That activity, it's illegal now in Monterrey. Authorities tend to like look the other way around, but not necessarily.
So the most important work in the world for nothing and criminalized. Okay. Thank you.
Again, me. Okay, yes, I think it's great that you're involving all these actors along the society. I just have like, it's a pretty open questions, and I will ask Pemsa was here. But I just want to ask, like, okay, you're removing 1.9 tons have been removed, which is great. But if you're still inputting, you're still producing 2 tons, you get where I'm going, right? And of course, recycling, you're still adding more virgin plastic into the mix. So at the end, it's great to involve anyone. I just want to know if there's like clear actions and a pathway to PEMSA, that it's the biggest producer there, to like stop producing as much plastic and not use this as an opportunity to do like greenwashing, or not saying there are, but you know, do they have like a policy in place to start changing or swifting and reducing the actual production? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And then there's a question or comment from online.
Thanks, Louise. This is from Thomas Brown. The circular initiatives that are being performed are wonderful, especially simple solutions by CHEP that Mariki spoke of. For SMEs that are aspiring to become more circular, what advice or starting point does the panel recommend that should be conducted by these SMEs?
Okay, this question is for Perla or anyone in here. It's interesting because we're both from Mexico, from the same institution, but she's from the north and I'm from the south. And we have a very different experience with waste pickers. In the south, in the second largest city of Mexico, Guadalajara, the main landfill was closed a year ago because of all of the environmental problems that it had. And there are, I think it's 10,000 waste pickers who actually live within the landfill. And they do have some sort of associations, but they didn't want to be removed from the landfill. They want to still work on the landfill. They opposed for months for the landfill closure, although there were programs, a social program to move them into as formal workers in the new facilities for waste separation. They didn't want that because they would lose their social norm, their way of living. So there's also some social conditions that are not easy to be changed. I don't know if anyone has any experience with this. This was a large problem.
That's very interesting. Thank you. So I don't know if any of the panelists want to, first maybe this question about, because
See,
it's not
I
a
mean,
true circular economy
Yes,
if it isn't first reducing
yes, obviously.
and feeding right back in.
Yes,
Yeah.
obviously. But you said in your instructions that we had to talk about the tricky stuff as well.
Exactly.
And that's one of the tricky matters in this project, for instance, as well. There's been actually, like I said, there's violence and in that community, no? There were some like leaders of the community. You have the very good leaders of the community who offer all their work and ideas and go and with us to make the cleanups, etc. But then you have the ones, for instance, that they don't want that to happen, and they were like, they took position of the big collectors of waste, and they were charging people to put their waste there. And then we will have some fights there with blood and the public security being involved in everything. So it's very important to work. Actually, we decided to make that project because Tec de Monterrey has been engaged in that community, I believe, for over 10 years with the state government, with the city government, and with other associations. So a lot of community work and engagement has been done for years. And they actually are the ones to tell us how to deal with these kind of situations. So, and I was discussing this with Valeria also when we were on our way here. It's very important for us, Tec, to listen to the community and understand their problems and where is this coming from? Why does that community don't want to move? And then not impose solutions, but have the community come up with the solutions that work with them and empower them to achieve their engagements. It's not an easy job. It's not quickly, but if we want to make these models and changes to be lasting, well, we have to spend time like making the systemic change that are needed, not one day to another solutions that won't really last over time.
So in South Africa, we have a strong position, and one of the Presidential Climate Commission Secretariat members is here. So he can attest to this as well. You know, we are very committed to a just transition in South Africa to low carbon and climate resilient economy. And that justice in the transition is exactly this kind of hard work. And it is not always pretty. You know, you go forward, you go back, you have tensions, but Parla, you're right. You know, it's the time and the commitment and being at the grassroots. So I think it is a challenge all around the world, you know, to try and make a better world besides making a low carbon and climate resilient world, to actually make social justice as part of it. So thank you for bringing those issues. Now you want to tell us.
Yeah, I wanted to
No,
tell
you must answer this question still.
Ah,
What are you doing? Because
same.
WWF South Africa has a strong program on climate, on plastics. And my colleagues will tell me this, you know, to pick up waste and do cleanups is like, yeah, exactly. So where is the lasting change around creating the waste in the first place?
Well, obviously FEMSA, it's an independent corporation that I don't get to influence in their, well, I don't make decisions for them.
Yeah.
But would like to say that Tecnológico de Monterrey has a pretty close relationship with FEMSA, and we have spoken about these issues and about what our vision of circular economy is. No, that is not recycling. There's actually like this discussion whether the recycling is or not a circular economy, because what we have to do is reduce, and what we have to do is use reusables and don't act the cradle to cradle philosophy, right? But we have engaged them. We have been discussing with them our vision and what we're doing in Ruta Azul, in our climate change plan. I do know we also have an institute that is working to develop sustainable materials. So we are a university that is very connected with industry. We don't lack of the talent in research and solution. What we have to strive the most is in having agency for having the decision makers, the CEOs, actually wanting to invest and applying those solutions. So this is a conversation that we're having with companies all around Mexico, not only FEMSA. And that's what I can say about that. You can ask more on that regard to FEMSA itself.
Thank you. So, I mean, this is an interesting question about the role of an academic institution in the whole kind of ecosystem of players in a particular sector. So, Perla, I know you want to tell us about more things, but I want to ask your commission if you will let me go to Kodani. Okay. Because I am a moderator that is absolutely terrible at time management. I have no idea how much. Anyway, so shifting from, you know, our businesses in our alliance to look at our city members, we have the 5 big cities of South Africa as a member of our alliance. That is the capital, Tshwane, Johannesburg, the economic hub, Ekurhuleni, which is part of that whole economic hub in the one province, eThekwini, where some of you might have seen extreme floods earlier this year, and then the city of Cape Town, which is a city where we nearly ran out of water the one time. We called it day 0. So Kodani is going to tell us a bit about, are there any circular economy approaches in the climate action plans of these 5 cities? Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. So as Louise has already elaborated, I work with the city of Joburg, coming from
Kodani, your mic isn't quite catching you. I think you have to just be a bit closer with it. Yeah.
Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Brilliant. So I work closely with the city of Joburg as part of the climate action implementation program. We call it the KAI program in short. And this program works with 7 cities across Africa. In South Africa specifically, we work with the city of Joburg and the city of Tshwane. So those of you who are from South Africa or are familiar with South Africa, you'll know that the city of Joburg, the city of Tshwane, and the city of Ekurhuleni form like a triangle. Most people don't know that usually when you land at the OR International Airport, you are actually in the city of Ekurhuleni, not in the city of Johannesburg. So that's how close the 3 cities are. So I'll be talking about actions from those 3 cities. So to start with, the 3 cities have climate action plans, which C40 supported them in developing. And these plans are basically like a roadmap or a Bible for the cities on how they plan and organize themselves around issues of mitigation and adaptation in the city. So they guide the city to avoid locking themselves on high carbon intensive future, and also on identifying the climate impacts and also addressing them through the city infrastructure and services that the city provides. So through these climate action plans, they are also very elaborate on addressing the issue of waste and the issue of diverting waste to landfill. And that's where the circular economy aspect of the city work really lies. So the city of Joburg in particular, their land space, the landfill space is actually running out in the next 4 years. So it's urgent that the city now focuses on diverting all of their waste from landfill. And the city has begun exploring ways of taking all of their waste, not just the plastic and the paper, but including their organic waste. So the KAI program is supporting the city now with the project that we've just started, which is looking at diverting garden waste or green organic waste from landfill. And what they want to do with that is that they want to target not only including circularity, but working within the different city departments. So the city has many city departments and has also entities that function as private sort of entities that supply the city. So for instance, we have a company called Pick It Up, which is responsible for all the waste collection in the city. So the city wants to work with all those partners and also with the private sector to address this problem. So for that particular project, what they're planning to do is divert green waste or garden waste, starting with waste that is produced by the other departments such as City Parks, which is responsible for maintaining all the city green spaces. Some of you might have heard that Johannesburg has the biggest man-made urban forest in the world. So it's a lot of trees and a lot of greenery to maintain, and all of that currently most of it ends up in the landfill. So targeting that waste and then turning it into compost, which will then be used again by City Parks and all of the city's other projects that have to do with agriculture, food systems, where they're working with small producers and also working on urban gardens to produce food, so that compost will then be used through that. But then there's a question of then what happens to the people that were already supplying these entities with compost? What happens to them? So what the city wants to do is not to handle this by itself, but to work with the private sector and the communities and the different stakeholders that were already involved in running this project. A few years ago, the city did try to secure land for composting and try to run their own composting plant, but they quickly realized that that was not their strong point. So this time around, the city is not just focusing only on circularity and diverting the waste, but also on collaboration and working with other stakeholders within the city who are good at what they do, which the city might not be as brilliant at, to help them with closing this loop. So there's also consideration for residential waste and also channeling that into the system. But the first priority will be trying to organize within the city and also getting private sector assistance in terms of the technology and also in terms of the management of the whole business system of getting that compost out and into the public. And then the city of Tshwane, on the other hand, they are also facing a similar challenge, and they're also focusing on green waste. But they have identified a particular stream of waste, which is the waste that they chip down into wood. So currently that waste also goes into the landfill. And as I'm speaking here, they've actually sent out an expression of interest to ask for proposals from the private sector and businesses to tell the city what they can do with this waste. Through innovative ideas, through existing business models that are already exist in the city. And what the city is saying is that we're not going to make you pay for this waste, because clearly sending this waste to landfill is just creating more methane and a large problem for the city in terms of management and financial resources that are needed to transport the waste to the landfill and also to manage the waste fill. So they're saying, we will actually appreciate anyone who can come and take this waste off our hands, of course, doing it sustainably and coming up with ways to better make use of it. And that those companies will then go into an agreement, a legal agreement with the city around the collection and facilitating how they work with this communities where this waste is produced. And it will be a mutual beneficial agreement. So there are other ways of making circularity work, which don't necessarily include money, but there's a strong aspect of partnership and collaboration in that. I don't know if there are any questions before I go to Ekurhuleni.
So I want to just pull out something you just said as a response to the colleague who raised the issue of small businesses. You know, this is one way that collaboration between the city and small businesses, you know, they're getting a free input to their business, which is a form of a subsidy in a way.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting thought about, you know, these circularity questions. So that's very fascinating. Thanks, Godani. I think go to the third city and then we'll take questions on any of it.
Yeah, so the cities are trying to open up to say, as much as they need to create revenue, there are actually other ways to make the cities work better that are not necessarily, you know, you pay us and we'll do this for you, or we pay you and you'll do this for us. And then the city of Ekurhuleni is part of the global methane hub, which C40 is also supporting on. But they've also had other projects that are going on. So they have a project which is supported by Oxfam, which is similar to the project that she was talking about. So they work with community-based organizations and they register them into this cooperative that go and collect waste in areas that the cities have not, the city of Ekurhuleni has not been able to reach. And these cooperatives then collect that waste, organize around selling it to big recyclers who then recycle the waste. So there's like a system that has been created which allows this community-based organization to be registered and acknowledged by the city, and the I don't want to say formalized, but it takes out that hassle of them being viewed as criminals. They're recognized by the city, their work is recognized by the city, and the city also facilitates signing of MOUs with development that is happening around the city. So for instance, if there's a new development, those cooperative, those community cooperatives can then go into an MOU with the new development to be the official off-takers of the recyclables in that particular development. So the city facilitates that and makes sure that it's smooth, it's all recognized, so there's no question of their security and their legality, and they also help in providing PPE and so on. So that's one of the ways that Ekurhuleni is looking at addressing this problem, and particularly working with communities. As Luis has already alluded, we have a big informal waste pickers like all over the South African cities, even the small South African cities. So most cities are trying to find out how can we bring them in, because they're already doing such a good job. And I think you said something about the social norms. So most of them don't necessarily want to be given a job and suddenly wear overalls and whatnot. They want to do what they want to do. So there's also an important aspect of communicating and understanding what is it that the community wants, what is it that the people that are already working in the sector by themselves. I mean, some of the things that we take for granted is how brilliant people are at self-organizing. So when we come in, we must always be careful as cities not to come in as, oh, we know it all. but to try and understand what have they been doing and what can we do to enhance that instead of taking it away.
Thank you, Kodani. Any questions from online or in the room? So Noluthando, I'll take you first and then come to you, sir.
This is from Janet Cherry.
Oh, hello, Janet.
Are there good examples of functioning waste cooperatives from other countries?
So I don't know if are there good examples from other countries of functioning waste cooperatives?
Actually, one of the inspiring success stories for Arroyo Vivo is, I don't know if the person who made the question or you guys saw this documentary called Wasteland, that I can't remember the name of the director and the artist that did this documentary, but it's the story behind it, or the main story that the documentary tells. It's about the waste pickers of Sao Paulo. So they went through this whole process of organizing and formalizing, and that's one of the models that we are following in Tecnológico Monterrey in Arroyo Vivo. Actually, I was reading, I bought The Lonely Planet of Egypt because I'm gonna take some days off after copies, it's over. And I read about a success story in El Cairo as well. Something, I don't know it profoundly, but I did read that they were, because there are these statistics that waste pickers are actually the ones who collect more recyclables and actually make recycling happen, even though it's not in the rates that we want. So this organization in El Cairo, it's called Garbage City. And for a while, they prohibited them from operating, and the garbage issue got out of hands. So they helped the community to keep doing their job in a better way. I just learned that from reading Lonely Planet, but I'm definitely look more into it to have more ideas for Arroyo Vivo. But if you haven't seen that documentary, Wasteland, it's a success story of Sao Paulo in Brazil.
Thank you very much, Perla. And just a shout out to Janet. Janet Cherry is dating back to the 1980s, somebody in South Africa who has worked at that grassroots level to empower people and participate with people. So yeah, she's a great leader in our country, actually. And one of those that doesn't, stand up high. Yeah. So I don't know. Sir, you wanted to ask a question. Sorry, I got distracted by appreciating Janet.
Thank you. I think it's good to be distracted because so interesting discussion is happening. I'm Atik Saman from Curtin University, Western Australia, and we also separate organic and food waste. So we call FOGO, food organic and garden organic. So what is happening? These are the good story. But what happens end of recycling or separating organic waste is because there's a lot of contaminations, like people put plastic, people put metals, whatnot. So then the problem comes is like actually companies like in Western Australian context, like local government who is taking care of those FOGO and prepare a kind of compost and a kind of product out of those organic. It's not happening, not the way, the scale they want. Yes, it's happening, but not 100% efficient. So those are the kind of challenge that we can see that is happening at local level or the community level. So what sort of challenges like in your community you see and share that thoughts? Thanks.
So currently at a household level, there's a big challenge. There is no separation of organic waste that is currently happening. for garden waste, there's a bit of a system that no one put in place, but generally because it's bulky, people tend to put it aside. Sometimes if it's on a personal household level, like it's pruning season, someone might hire a buggy and then go dump it at a corner somewhere, which is also problematic. The city also allows private citizens to drive to the landfill site if they've got enough quantities to take it there. But for food waste especially, it's really difficult to separate. So this program is still in the planning phases. So that's one of the questions that we are also looking to answer and to also learn from other cities how they've managed to do that. And part of the reason the city of Joburg in particular started by focusing within their own entities and their own ways that is being produced by the entities such as city parks is because of that reason, to trial the model first within the city and then expand more into the household level, which is much more difficult. Currently, there's a few trials that are happening within the city for other recyclables, so paper, plastics, and so on. And that seems to be going well, but there's still that problem of separation. So what the city does that for those neighborhoods where they're trialing the program, they provide a separate plastic bag, which is recyclable and recycled for the recyclables. And then there's a separate collection on that day. But the infrastructure is still not great because I live in one of those neighborhoods. You have then to find your own bin to put that plastic in and wait for the 1 week a day where they come. So the system is not perfect. I know, for instance, the city of Cape Town, which is also one of the ACA cities and one of the C40 cities, they provide individualized bins for recycling. And I think Louise, who's a resident of the city of Cape Town, can tell us more. But yeah, it's still a lot of work and learning in progress.
Thank you, Kudani. And I think that is a wonderful sentence to end the whole panel on, because there is still a lot of work and learning in progress on all of these approaches. And I want to thank the people who came and attended and raised important and challenging questions, and the panel for not just presenting the shiny side, but starting to unpack what are the tricky parts and the things we can work on together to solve. So thank you very much. I was fascinated this whole event. I hope other people were also. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. It was a pleasure. I had so many other things to say. I know.
Hi, can you hear us?
Hi, yes, we can. Oh, I can.
Okay, can we test your video?
I can. I'm putting it on now.
Gorgeous.
Can you see me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem.
We'll just start shortly.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
Mayor Campbell?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. May we see you?
Okay, can you see me?
Yes, yes, we can see you. Gorgeous. Thank you so much.
Okay,
We'll be starting shortly.
all right.
Oh, Hastings is here. I'm so glad. Hastings, please come, take over. Hey. May we please have everyone to settle down? We are starting a session that is about implementing a just transition in South African cities. It is a session that we are hoping to share experiences and lessons from cities in South Africa. It is cities that are implementing climate change response or the just transition with support from the C40, which they are members of, and also with support from the South African Cities Network and the South African Local Government Association. My name is Mtobeli Kolisa. I'm from the South African Local Government Association. We have a colleague of ours who will be joining online to contextualize the event that we are going to have today. Before I introduce everyone else who is here, I just wish to take the opportunity to welcome all of you who are participating in this session, the excellencies, the mayors who are participating in this session, in particular the mayor of Ekurhuleni and the mayor of Tswelopele municipality who are participating. We'll introduce them a bit later today, but also really thank you very much. And also welcome all colleagues who are participating online in this session. We're going to request our colleague from the South African Cities Network, Ditebogo Makele, to contextualize the session. Over to you, Ditebogo.
Thank you so much, Tobisi, and good afternoon, everyone. And I am joining you all the way from Johannesburg and wish I could be there with you. We are going to start this discussion with a bit of context of where we are as South African cities. We know that in a majority urban world, what cities do today will affect the extent and the pace of the wider sustainability transition. Cities and urban areas are critical and crucial for ensuring global sustainability and resilience, as they are places where a multiplicity of urban challenges collide. We've got food and water insecurity, we've got limited and sometimes lack of basic services, and all of these are overlayered by the impacts of climate change and disaster risks. South African cities, like many other cities around the world, face serious resource and ecosystem and socioeconomic challenges. And in response to these challenges, over the past 10 to 15 years, a combination of national policy frameworks and city-level strategies have emerged to enable cities to begin responding to these challenges in a more sustainable way, to ensure that we create thriving, livable, and inclusive cities. At the national level, we have the National Development Plan 2030, which really sets the tone in terms of what we can do to address some of these developmental challenges that we have. Chapter 5 of the National Development Plan is premised on the notion that for us to address our development challenges, we must ensure environmental sustainability. We must build resilience to the effects of climate change, particularly for poorer communities and the most vulnerable. And it ensures and calls for an equitable transition to a low carbon, diverse and inclusive economy. In other words, a just transition, which is what we're talking about today. And as I've been following some of the sessions over the past week and a half of COP27, the just transition is an imperative that all cities must embrace and must be able to implement over the short, medium, and long term. The result in our context in South Africa has been a growing commitment to this just transition, with a diverse set of strategies across different cities, some at a slower pace than others, but certainly committed to embracing this just transition. But one of the things that is required, and we'll hear more from some of the things that are required from the speakers today, is around cooperative governance that needs to become a vibrant and creative reality for just urban transitions and transformative adaptation to really take root in our cities. Cooperative governance in our context means bringing everybody together, everyone that has a say in how our cities develop. All of society, not just government, not just private sector, not just civil society, not just communities, but everyone collating and corralling together to ensure that we do address the challenges that we face collectively. And as we talk about the just transition and cooperative governance and what's required on that, we recognize that there are significant and unparalleled changes that are needed across all sectors of the economy. If we're talking about a just transition, all sectors of the economy will require a transformation, will require some changes. And a lot of these happen at the local level. A lot of these will be impacting people, residents of cities. So importantly, this just transition must be just, it must be equitable, it must ensure that the rights and voices of workers, of vulnerable and poor communities, of women, of everyone that really has to have a say in this are heard, so that we're able to shift towards these low carbon, diverse and inclusive economies that we aspire to in the just transition. So we'll hear more about what some of our cities are doing in relation to the just transition, ensuring that no one is left behind. We have a number of our cities that have in place climate action plans already that talk about mitigation and adaptation strategies, that talk about the just transition and ensuring inclusivity and ensuring that everyone's voice is heard in this transition to more resilient, more sustainable, and more inclusive cities. A number of these climate action plans need financing, and we've heard in this week and a half of COP27 that there is financing available, and that there are channels that are being created and that have already been created to ensure that this finance channels to the right places and impact the very cities where all of these challenges are addressed. And so today I'd like to just highlight the fact that without cities, the battle for sustainable development won't be won. And so it's important for cities and city leaders and everyone else, all of society, to rally together and make sure that we address these challenges in a just and sustainable way. Thank you very much, Thobeli, and I am looking forward to the discussions and the reflections that we'll hear from some of our all of society representatives in this session. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Titeboho. Thank you very much. Colleagues, the session that we are having today, we have divided it into two, can I call it, sub-sessions. The first part of the session is going to share experiences from the mayors of two municipalities, a metro and a smaller municipalities. And then the second session will be discussions by colleagues from various institutions, partners that work in the space, interact with cities and municipalities as a panel discussing the experiences as would have been shared by the mayors. So the first part of this session is going to be facilitated by our colleague from the C40, Hastings Chikoko. If you may take over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thobeli. So as he has said, we'll take turns in moderating this event. But because he's coming back, and I don't think he introduced himself very well, let me just quickly introduce him now so that when he comes back, I just call him back here. So Thobeli, for those of you who don't know him, is actually a chief officer responsible for infrastructure delivery, spatial transformation, and services and sustainability cluster at the South Africa Local Government Association. A very, very credible partner for the work that we are doing with cities on just transition. And then Thobeli is not really a new colleague on the space. Prior to that, he was a group head for the Department of Environmental Management Services at the city of Tshwane. So we have worked with him for a long time, and he'll be coming back to do the moderation, but I just thought you should know who he is. Liteboho, thank you so much for your remarks. If you're still online, I think you have done a very good job in situating what we would be talking about this afternoon. You really have highlighted the importance of cities in implementing the just transition. This is why I am very, very honored to have our two mayors in this room. And thank you so much, Mayor Campbell. And also really, really thank you, Mayor Mpukutsi, for making time to really demonstrate the political leadership that a transition requires in South Africa. So our next speaker is the executive mayor of Ekhululeni, Mayor Tanya Campbell. Mayor Campbell is a lifelong resident of Ekhululeni, and is really passionate about making a difference in the city she calls home. And from a young age, Mayor Campbell has been an activist, but also really a community development advocate. But we did not just invite her to this panel just because most of us will be landing in OR Tambo, which is in her city. But we invited her in this panel because she's doing excellent work to enable a just transition in the city. If you haven't seen the poster somewhere out there, may I just encourage you to go and look at the poster and look at what she's doing in Ekhululeni. It outlines Ekhululeni's plans to establish a local just transition commission to ensure multi-stakeholder dialogue and collaboration. So Mayor Campbell is joining us virtually, and I hope that technology will help us, but she will speak on the role of cities in implementing South Africa's just transition. Mayor, would you like to take it from there? And thank you so much for making time.
Yes, thank you. Greetings to everyone today. Thank you for the invite. And Hastings, thank you for the advertisement about my city. When everybody lands at Oliver Tambo, you are landing in Ekhululeni, which is our pride and joy of our city. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for the time to engage on the importance of implementing a justice transition in the energy sector. Ekhululeni is a major manufacturing hub and logistics center. The city faces high rates of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Excuse me, my throat's a little bit dry from flu. A just transition is therefore critical because without it, we risk further entrenching existing inequalities. We are proud to be the first city in South Africa to establish a Just Transition Commission. The commission will ensure that all voices, including the communities, workers, businesses, government, vulnerable groups, women, youth, and academia are heard and taken into account when planning a just transition at a local level. In addition, the Commission can feed into the provincial and the national just transition dialogue and plans. Ensuring that no one is left behind is a guiding principle for us. The city is committed to partnering with a wide range of stakeholders to achieve our sustainability and climate goals. In order for this transition to be fair, the benefits and burdens must be distributed equally, and to those who stand to lose from the transition must be offered the necessary support. This is to secure the alternative opportunities through reskilling and job placement programs, for example. In the city of Ekhululeni, with the support of the C40, we've commissioned an economic analysis to better understand which value chains will likely be impacted, which jobs are at risk in the fossil fuel industries, and what kinds of jobs will be created in green sectors, and what support will be needed for workers to need to transition. It's also important to ensure that resilience is considered. In Ekurhuleni, our analysis will look at water security and food security. Through partnerships, cities are in a better position to identify the best representatives for different communities and sectors. If you take, for example, we are partnering with our local business forum to ensure that the voice of small and medium businesses find expression in the social dialogues we will be hosting. From social dialogue to implementation, partnerships are a key success factor for driving forward a just transition. Cities can and must act on just transition. It mustn't just be just transitioning, but just transition. Cities have an important role to play in just transition because we are closest to workers, youth, communities, businesses, which will be directly affected both by the transition and by climate change. Without a bottom-up approach, communities will be left behind. And what we'll have is just a transition rather than a just transition. Cities need to take a proactive approach to ensuring that local economies transition in an equitable manner. This is highly important for our workforce. Cities must advocate for their role in national plans and policies on just transition. Cities play a huge role in policy formation. In some of the meetings that I have sat prior, it was always said that mayors and executive mayors haven't got a role. We do have a role. We need to create that role in our policies on just transition. In South Africa, the 5 C40 cities are working together to strengthen the voice of local government in our national plans. We achieved a great feat. The Presidential Climate Commission, which is responsible for planning South Africa's just transition, did not initially have a seat for us as local government. Earlier this year, through our advocacy, we managed to secure a seat for mayors. Meetings between mayors and the commission have already started taking place, and these conversations are now starting to bear the fruit for our citizens. I would like to encourage you all to have these conversations with the respective people within your spheres or within your influence markets. If we are to reach the goals and desired outcomes of the summit, it is crucial that our cities and our municipalities do so and take control in driving the policies for just transition. I thank you, and thank you for let me having a space here today. It is really an honor for me. Thank you.
Yes, she deserves a round of applause. Thank you so much, Mayor Campbell, for the leadership you are providing as the first city to establish a Just Transition Commission. But I also liked the emphasis you have placed on this not being a never-ending process. We are not transitioning. It's a transition. It's something that we're going to start, and it's something that we're going to finish. Thank you so much, Mayor, for your time. Really appreciate that. Colleagues, when we talk about this just transition in South Africa, it's not just about the mega cities that are maybe part of the C40, but it's about smaller cities, smaller municipalities, smaller towns. Local municipalities are also vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, with actually some of the towns built on the back of fossil fuels, such as coal mines and power stations. Actually, if you look at where our coal mines are located, some of them are really, most of them are really closer to the smaller municipalities. So it is really a great pleasure to have my colleague I just got introduced to last month, and really enjoyed in interacting with her, Mayor Mpukutsi, who is the mayor of Tswelopele local municipality in the Free State. And she will tell us more about how the concept of just transition does pan out in a smaller municipality. But just to say a little bit about her, she plays also a role as MMC speaker of the district, and is a member of the SADC Climate Change Champion. And she's a member of SADC and really recognized as the climate change champion. But one thing I know is also she's an ambassador for Clean City and Clean Audit. She talked about this to me the other day, and a member of the legislature serving in different communities. And also NCOP representative on the public accounts and finance and other legislature roles. Mayor Mpukutsi, I would like you, if you can, to just help us understand, how do we build better communities, improve socioeconomic profile of municipality, especially a small municipality such as yours? The floor is yours, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone that is present here today. As indeed said, that my name is Kinalema Mpukutsi. I'm from the small municipality in the Free State. The municipality is based in the district called Joliputswa. Let me start by saying that in a similar pattern as we see between developed and developing countries at the country scale, communities in smaller municipalities face disproportionately higher vulnerabilities to climate change. While they have not contributed as much emissions, however, they have a responsibility to ensure that their future development doesn't worsen their vulnerable situation. Now, what do you mean by that? We are saying in terms of mitigation, the small municipalities should be really looking at emission advanced avoidance going forward, because they are in a development tragedy and are currently not individually emitting as much carbon yet as big cities. As it is said that my municipality is a small municipality. We are not at a stage whereby the big cities are emitting, but we've got a role and a responsibility to make sure that whatever we do, we are not emitting, we are not making the livelihoods of our communities vulnerable and worsen off. Maybe one has to say in the same pattern, we have to make sure that in terms when the disaster strike, our municipality is well positioned to make sure that we are able to evacuate. But in South Africa, we don't have means as a small municipality to collect revenue, because our revenue depend only on services that we are rendering to communities. And in an instance whereby our infrastructure is vulnerable to these disasters, we will then be unable to connect revenue to be able to render services in an effective and efficient manner. Now, what then needs to happen? What needs to happen is that we prepare ourselves, we mitigate, we adapt. But what is in transition for Tswelopele local municipality, as small as it is? Tswelopele is one of the municipalities that is agriculturally based. We have a responsibility to make sure that the land tenure and the land is secured, and we mitigate. In everything that you are doing, as we provide all these services, it is difficult and it is hard for small municipalities like Tswelopele to abstract skills from like your land use planning, like any other skills that is acquired by bigger municipalities. Now it is a challenge for us. We rely solely on the intergovernmental transfers that comes from your province and national. We don't have our own means of revenue, but we've got the responsibility to make sure that our communities that are working at the farms, their jobs are secured, their well-being are secured. And in so doing, we are also calling to the fact, Yaguti, Tina, as local municipality, we have to transition in a way that is fair and that is just. We cannot just say big cities must transition, but us, we are not going to take our part. Hence, we are saying it is a responsibility of each and every municipality and each and every city to take good care of their municipalities. Because when disaster strike, municipalities are expected to be the ones that respond first. But in terms of the South African Constitution, disaster is a sole responsibility of your province and national government. And funds are located at provincial and national government spheres. Now, we don't have funds, we don't have means to do all these things, but we have a responsibility to make sure that as and when we develop economics in terms of economic development of our institutions, we make sure that they are just and they are environment friendly. We have to plant trees. We have to make sure that in everything that you are doing as a food basket of the country, we transit, we make sure that we are not transitioning, but we take our communities along and move with them to move forward in everything that we do. There is nothing that is going to happen everywhere else except with us, with municipalities. But what is critical and important, we are in short of finances. We want infrastructure finances that will enable us to be able to make everything possible for those communities that are vulnerable. Everybody else thinks that climate change effects are felt by bigger cities and bigger metros, but it is not the fact. Even us, we are vulnerable because when it is flooded, we are expected to evacuate our own communities. When the infrastructure of roads is flooded, the roads are washed off. We have to make sure that there are means and ways of communities to get to emergency services like your hospitals, like your own clinics. And who becomes vulnerable most? It's your women, it's your children, it's your youth, and people with disabilities. And the aged also becomes affected. So we as an institution, we as a municipality, we've got the responsibility to make sure that we take good care of those communities that are unable to pay for their services. And in an instance whereby all these infrastructure are washed off, then our ratepayers, as they are ones that are paying for the property rates, they won't be in a position to be able to pay. And that will lead to the social unrest and many other issues that will affect the well-running of our own municipality. So we are saying to everybody, let's join together, hands together, and let's transition now. Just transition is not only in a form of energy. It is in many ways. You can transition in wastewater treatment. You can transition even in providing food to those people. It is not only energy that is transition, but for us, it's an opportunity because we are not already there. We are still coming as a small municipalities. But what we need to do is to make sure that we are not caught in the process of emitting and have to use more money in ensuring that we redo the unbalances of the past. I want to thank you for those. I'll wait for any other inputs.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mayor. You know, climate change is unjust, is unfair. And what the mayor is saying here is it's a responsibility of everyone to actually correct the injustices of climate change. Now, South Africa, often at times we have an excuse that there is no political will. Two mayors have spoken here, one from a mega city and one from a smaller town. And for me, when I listen to this mayor speak, when I recognize the fact that the president of South Africa has actually committed to a just transition and has established a presidential climate commission, I just feel like we have an opportunity here. We have an opportunity to do something. We have an opportunity to transition justly. Let's take on that opportunity. I would like to just pause here before I call my brother Tobeli again. We have listened to the keynote that has situated this session. We have listened to the political leadership. If you don't mind, I will ignore the informalities of a podium. We have listened to the political leadership. Is there anyone who has a comment, a question, especially to the political leaders, or a comment on what has been said? If you don't take advantage of this space, I'll use it because I'm the facilitator and I have the possibility. Anyone who would like to say anything? Oh, okay. I thought you'd like to. You're also allowed, though. Your time will come. You have a chance. Anyone who would like to say something? All right. I'm going to take the opportunity then. I would like to go back to Mayor Mpukutsi. You've said a lot. You've talked about collective responsibility to address climate change in South Africa. Could you just say a little bit more in terms of how do you communicate climate change to residents in your town, in your municipality, in such a way that they are moved to act, in such a way that they see the logic of action? Can you just say something around that in 2 to 3 minutes?
Thank you for the question. It is indeed a good question. The only way is to communicate with your communities in a language that they understand. And how do we then do that? In all our meetings that we have, we always make sure that part of the agenda, that climate change is part of the agenda. We teach them that we need to have a behavioral change. We must stop doing things in the manner that we are used to do things, because in anything that is going to happen, they'll be affected. It does not matter whether it's a small municipality. At the end of the day, we have to make sure that we teach them that they need to take good care of the environment, because environment and the Mother Earth is the planet that all of us, we've got the responsibility to take care of for the future generation. And how do we then do that? We've got a system whereby we have ward councillors, ward committees, and myself as a mayor, I do have my forums that I engage with everybody else, but mostly my main interaction becomes with the women, the ones that are many times vulnerable and left out, the ones that make sure that when the vulnerability is felt, women are the ones that feel it more. So you need to speak to the people in a language that will make them to understand, and tell them that we need to make choices that are not proper, that are not suitable for all of us. Instead of us doing things that we are used to do, instead of us, when we plan for the IDP, we do it just formality. We need to change and say, in an instance whereby the disaster struck in Tsholopeni, what is it that you are going to do? How do we then plan in terms of your special development planning? When you put your people, don't put them in a wetland, don't put them near the rivers, because that's where our people informally, they would want to go and put themselves. But we need to be, as politicians, to go to them and engage them to say, in an instance that the disasters are going to strike, where you are seated, you are going to be worsened off. We have to make that everything is possible. And then in anything that we are doing, the indigenous knowledge that our forefathers and our foremothers has, we need to utilize that, because climate change is not a new thing. Science must be informed by indigenous knowledge, and our elders, they know a better way of dealing with climate change. Let me give a classical example. When you prune your trees, you cannot just wake up in the morning and decide to prune your trees. There are ways and times when you're supposed to prune your trees. You cannot do things as you wish, as we are all aware that technology has taken over our lives. But we need to stick to the old ways of doing things, because in so doing, you are mitigating, even you are adapting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I'm going to transition with the program now. I'm going to read a progress. So I want to make sure that we transition justly with the program as well. We have some minutes that we can have a conversation, but I would like to have a conversation with these people in front here. We have listened to Liteboho. We have listened to Mayor Campbell. We have listened to Mayor Mpukutsi. I would like us to now have this conversation around just transition in South Africa. Last time I called people to speak, they didn't speak. Maybe I don't have a charming voice enough. So I'm going to ask my brother to come here again, Tobeli. Maybe he's going to charm you into speaking. So Tobeli, please take it from here and let's have a conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hastings. We are indeed are going to have a conversation. We have had 3 framing inputs that gives us a sense of what does this all mean in, firstly, a practitioner in local government, secondly, 2 leaders in local government who are within the institutions of local government. Now we need to hear from people who are not in the institution of local government, but interact with local government, looking from outside and say, this is what we expect our municipalities to do in response to climate change and in transitioning our society. Now, before I do that, I think it's only appropriate that my colleague Hastings, who introduced me, I should introduce him appropriately. Hastings from the city, from C40, is holding 2 responsibilities. One, he's a managing director that is responsible for regions and mayoral engagements. He's also a regional director for Africa. He's based in the city of Johannesburg. That is Hastings. Now, he's going to help us. I'm sure, I know that he will from time to time chip in and take us forward in the discussions. But over and above that, we have various colleagues that I'm going to call upon. I will introduce them as I call upon them to make an input. I want to start with 2 colleagues who have been part or are part of the Presidential Coordinating Commission on Climate Change, because they've been sitting and saying, how do we take South Africa forward? And in so doing, in respect of transitioning to a low carbon and resilient society. In so doing, they've been looking at the various sectors of society and saying, in relation to local government, what should happen? The first person that I'm going to call upon is Happy Kambule. Happy Kambule is the head of environment and energy at Business Unity South Africa. He is a former commissioner in the commission that I've referred to. Happy, I want you to, can you please have a mic with you? I want to start with you. I want to start with you, just one question. In order to manage time, I'm going to come back twice. There's 2 questions I want us to discuss, all of us, but we'll start with the first question from each one of you, just to give us a perspective of what you think is needed in local government in order to truly transition in a just way.
Thanks. Good afternoon, colleagues. Yeah, so I think the most important thing, at least during my time in the commission, that's something that came out much more apparent than ever, and during my time as in BUSA, is that we really just have to do the basics right. One of the key things about climate action, as well as when you build ambition, is that we're not starting from 0, right? So all the climate ambition that we've built up right now started from a certain point. We'll say the UNFCCC in 1992 or 1996, and then you had the Kyoto Protocol, and then you had the different types of other agreements, whether it's the Doha Amendment, and then you got the Paris Agreement. Just like in South Africa, in the city context, if we do not have a good base to start from, we're not going to have a good transition. So what I mean by that is that if we don't have good governance, one, which is an administrative function, things are not going to go well, because the necessary revenue and the necessary resources that the mayor is speaking about cannot be utilized in an efficient manner in order to get the necessary outcomes, which is the first part. Then the second part is that if we don't have the basic services, which is the key infrastructure for us to be able to build on, to build our resilience, to reduce our vulnerability, as we are getting more and more exposed to climate change, things aren't going to occur in the manner that they need to. And then the last part, which is key about getting the basics right, is that as the conversation has started to veer into the integrated planning side of things, is that when we start to do integrated planning, We actually have to implement what is in the document in the manner in which communities have communicated it and have said it should be done, as opposed to having an integrated plan which goes on one side and then the actual investment that goes into the key infrastructure goes the other side, where you start to lose that social buy-in that is necessary for a just transition to occur when you come in and try to buy and to get that particular political buy-in.
Thank you, Happy. Now I want to go to Me Makoma Likalaka. Me Makoma is from Earth Life, is a known activist for a fair and just society. She is a member of the Presidential Climate Commission. From your point of view, Me Makoma, what is it that you think should happen in local government in order to make sure that we don't just transition, but we transition justly?
Thank you very much. I would like to compliment from where Happy's introduction was. I think we all have heard how the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the recent reports that for sub-Saharan Africa, mid-century projected climate change impacts are already being felt. And I think within the different towns and cities in the country, that is a testimony that the impacts are already felt. And thus, we need a transformational adaptation pathways to ensure that our cities can be resilient and adapt to the change. And I would like to welcome the South African Local Government Association for spearheading this and ensuring, particularly with the mayors and the political leadership, to ensure that this does really take place. I was asked to give maybe what in 5 years issues that the local government or the cities or the towns should be focusing on. One of the major issues that we see around the infrastructure, adaptation of buildings and infrastructure to potential climate shocks. We've seen in the recent rain bomb in Durban, how infrastructure was affected. As such, also in case we have heat waves and also fires, that I think it's one of the things. There should be bylaws on climate-friendly building going forward, and the ones that we have should be retrofitted. But since we are facing a water crisis, I think most municipalities also don't have water, most cities don't have water. We should be able to find a way on how do we develop conservation programs to ensure water security and sustainability. And that is because water is a medium through which climate change is felt and will also determine our adaptation and resilience as a people. The other issues around pursuing energy efficiency to reduce demand on the electricity grid. It's quite important for municipalities, whether it's big cities or small town, to consider moving away from electricity that they have now to invest much more in renewable energy technologies. Imagine if you can have solar panels on people's roofs in small towns, what difference would that make? And that would also assist in with the problem that we have around revenue collection, because what would need only installation, would need the seat for doing that, and actually there's money for that through the climate finance project. So that energy efficiency would be important, but much more moving to what's renewable energy technologies for particularly vulnerable people. The other stuff that I also liked from the mayor of Ekurhuleni, it's around creating a local climate commission in the city. I think that is very important, that that would assist in making sure that ordinary people are involved and also are part of designing the transition at a local level, because the transition has got to be locally led and there must be from below, in such a way that if that commission is available, I think that the issues that are spoken about around multi-stakeholder discussions, it's going to be easier. And that would also alleviate the issue that people at a local level feel that there's a top-down approach in bringing about any change in their municipalities or in their local areas. So if we have that at a local level, I think that is a very good chance of having ordinary people and industries that are in that particular locality to come together, discuss and shape the local transformation or the local transition that would be owned by the municipality, so that everyone can take responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Memakom. Now, this is a view from people who are sitting in the commission, which is charged with engaging with society to make sure that we carry society along as we transition, to make sure that we attend to issues that are of concern to different parts of society, different role players in society. Now, I want to move to further to colleagues who are interacting with local government in their various positions in society. I want to start with Mandy Ville, who is from Gender CC SA, Women for Climate Justice. From your point of view, you may have heard also Mayor Pukunzi saying that part of the vulnerable sections of society is women. From that point of view, what do you think should happen in municipalities to ensure that as we transition, we take along and address the issues of vulnerable women?
Thank you so much, Program Director. And thank you for the opportunity. As someone who works with local communities, we try to go to the communities to try and explain what is just transition. And what we get there, I think Commissioner Happy has stated it so clearly that service delivery is one of the issues that are going to make just transition quite easy. So over and above the triple challenges that South Africa is facing of poverty, of inequalities, of unemployment, there are issues of service delivery that communities are struggling with. To start with, when we talk about vulnerable communities and women, we know that in climate change does not impact everyone the same way. There are differentiated impacts of climate change to men and women, and also to children. And there are intersectionalities as well of social status, of gender, of race, of economic status where you are. And as we know that most of our communities are faced with unemployment. So they struggle a lot to understand what we're talking about, or even to adapt to climate change issues. So when we talk about a just transition, and I know that it has been preached that it has to be inclusive, it has to be participatory and consultative. However, we feel that a lot of community members, especially women, are left out. And mainly because most of them have the burden of care work that they have to take care of, and they don't have time to go and attend these sessions. And also the lack of knowledge and information that communities are faced with. I know that the sessions of the Just Transition, they take place in most instances online. And when you talk to communities, they want to be part of this, but how do they engage? How do they take part? So one of the issues that they raise is that they need community Wi-Fi so that they are able to access the sessions and be able to engage meaningfully. And another thing is that the skills development, that's what communities complained with, that there's a lack of skills and there's no skills development centers in their areas. And they mentioned the acknowledgement of informal and secular economy, where women are most in majority in informal economy and secular economy. Also access to clean, safe, and affordable energy and water. We know that women work mostly with those things. They work with water, they work with energy. And another thing is that when we talk to communities, some of the things that they need to address, they have to talk to local ward councillors. And when they approach local ward councillors, because we encourage them to attend IDP meetings and be able to raise their issues to the local ward councillors, you find that the local ward councillors do not even have an idea what is climate change or the just transition that we're talking about. So I think one of the issues is that local ward councillors must be capacitated to be able to take communities through the transition. Equal representation of all stakeholders during consultations, because I think Honorable Mayor mentioned that this has to take into cognizance women, youth, people with disabilities, and indigenous people, you know, people in rural areas. They have to be part of the consultations. Upgrade of infrastructure, establishment of healthcare facilities. I work with communities in Orange Farm, where they live next to the industries, where most of the communities suffer, you know, health complications because of the air pollution. Now in their area, they don't have a clinic. There's no proper public transport infrastructure. They have to travel long distances to access public transport or to access a clinic. How do we talk about just transition when we have communities that do not have a health facilities? They also mentioned that there are no high schools in their areas. High school children have to walk long distances to go to another area to be able to get education. And it's a safety hazard for girls who have to travel even in the evening, especially those who are in matric, when they have to take extra classes. So yeah, I think I'll stop there for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ausindivile. Now, I want to bring in Shamila Reid. Shamila comes from Indalo Inclusive. I was in a session that Shamila was facilitating here. You know, the work that they do at Indalo. She's responsible there for climate policy, climate finance, and just transition portfolios. They were sharing as Indalo the work that they are doing with communities. And I think it will be so interesting, Shamila, to first, for those who are not part of the session, just quickly introduce what Indalo does. And from that point of view, then share with us what you think from the position of the work that you are doing, you think should happen in municipalities, should take place in municipalities in order to enhance, in part, what you are doing with communities in the context of the just transition.
Okay, thank you.
So Indalo Inclusive is an NPC based in Pretoria, and 80% of our work constitutes enterprise development support. But eco and inclusive enterprise development support. So that means there's a green element to our work, but also a social. Okay, but also a social element to our work. So we support green enterprises or enterprises that has a green business, both in terms of technical and financial support. And then we also have other components related to climate change, policy, and finance. And I'm assuming they want me to talk more about the enterprise development support component. So in terms of just transition, we have done a few projects in terms of just transition. And we have done a project in terms of the just energy transition specifically. The one I can refer to is one that we did in Imalahleni, so in Witbank. So basically we are looking at what are the sort of alternative value chains as opposed to coal that we can introduce in the communities through entrepreneurship. And we use the climate change policy and dialogue aspect of our work to kind of inform the sort of diversification plans. And coming back to what most people have been saying on the panel about, co-creating that with the community, etc. So recently we also did, in partnership with a university, we did some stakeholder engagements around Grootfontein power station, which is scheduled for decommissioning over the next couple of years. So that engagement was to understand sort of the just transition pathway, so the challenges and opportunities within Grootfontein. And we also, during that session, that event that we had there, we also went to visit the power station, the Grootfontein power station. And when you are in these spaces, you actually realize how enormous it is, and how much people are actually reliant on the system directly and indirectly. So it's this narrative of a just transition. Yes, it's needed, but it's not an easy thing, and it's complex and it's complicated, and and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and you kind of have to look at it within a system. So that's basically what Indalo does. So some of our enterprises that we supported through the just transition systems, like the one that we have in Mpumalanga, Keleseri Tourism. So he has opened an agriculture center that actually takes retrenched workers from coal power plants or whatever the case may be, and actually reskill them in agriculture, for instance. We have one that we support in the water sector that looks at water purification, because you cannot even drink the water in Imalahleni municipality. And then there's quite a few others that is related to that. So, and the way our enterprise model works is that there's both technical and financial support, and we try to get enterprises on different programs so that we actually get them to the point of full commercialization, and not only where they are, to the point where they actually see real socioeconomic and environmental impact, where they can generate revenue and create jobs as well. So coming back to the question of municipalities, I think municipalities should be doing exactly that. And I know C40 Cities is doing a lot of work on green jobs and entrepreneurship in response to the just transition. And if you look at South Africa's context, you need a response that addresses both our climate change and our development imperatives. From a youth perspective, which I also work in quite a bit, if you look at the youth unemployment rate, I think the president said at the State of the Nation address that is sitting at 65% at the beginning of the year. So definitely anything related to the green economy and green jobs and entrepreneurship opportunities should definitely be on the agenda of municipalities, be it in towns, be it in cities as well. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamila. Now, Kodani. Kodani Mlaudzi is a city advisor at C40 on issues of climate change mitigation. Koran, you have heard, firstly, from municipalities, you have heard from role players that interact with municipalities. You have heard Happy saying that the first thing that has got to happen if we're not going to increase vulnerabilities in the transition is that we first have to govern appropriately and deliver services. And that was agreed by Ausondiville. That if services delivery and governance at a local level falls apart, it increases the vulnerabilities of the communities. We have heard Umema Koma saying part of what needs to happen, which relates to service delivery, is that we've got to climate-proof infrastructure. You've got to especially in the areas of water, you've got to transition and move to renewable energy in municipalities. You've got to have an institutional means of driving and taking along different sections of society as you plan and implement your transition. We have just heard from Shamila, among other things, is that you already have a high level of unemployment of youth. And in the way we implement the transition, if it is got to be just, it has to be relevant to those youth. Now, from a point of view of somebody sitting at C40 trying to help and advise municipalities, what do you think should happen in municipalities?
Thank you. Luckily for me, we've reached that part of the program where I can just say I agree with everybody and we can all go home. So from a point of coming from C40 and also as someone who works directly with the city of Joburg, what I think is important in implementing a just transition in cities are three key things. First of all, as part of the planning, we cannot solve what we don't understand. And that is something that the panelists have already alluded to. So cities need to understand what is their current social queue. We all talk about the triple challenge that South Africa faces, poverty, unemployment, and so on. But those things are not the same across the different cities and across the different municipalities. So we need to understand what is exactly the impact for city of Joburg, what is exactly the impact for a smaller municipality like Tswelopele, and what are those things in terms of climate impacts that are going to affect those specific cities and municipality directly. And when we talk about the just transition, we talk about jobs that are going to be lost in the switch from fossil fuel. So we need to also understand what are those jobs that are going to be lost, who are those people that are going to be directly affected, and also who are the indirect jobs that benefits from that current value chain. So Shamila spoke about the power stations in Emalasheni. And when you look at that value chain, and also when you look at the value chain in the various cities, you've got the informal sector that benefits from those formal sectors. So you've got your informal traders that are selling lunch during the day to people that are working in the power station, people working in the fuel stations. Those are the people that are also going to be affected. So it's important for us to start understanding who's going to be affected. So as part of the work that we've been doing in cities in South Africa from C40 side, we've done a green job study analysis for South African cities. And through that study, we found that there's about 1.1 million jobs that can be created from the green economy. But having said that, which is good news, those jobs are not necessarily going to be created in places where jobs are going to be lost. So it's important to then understand what those things are. And that is also part of the work that we've also been doing at Ekurhuleni, to understand exactly, as Mayor Campbell alluded to earlier, where are the jobs going to be lost, who's going to be affected, the direct jobs, the indirect jobs. And then the city can then include that in their planning to ensure a just transition, to ensure that when they do their IDPs, those are some of the things that are taken into consideration. But apart from jobs, in looking at climate change in its full intensity, cities need to work and integrate climate actions, but not only just climate actions, but also the social and also economic aspect of the climate action that they're going to be taking. So we know the basic job of cities is service delivery. So in that delivering of services, how are they addressing the social and the economic issues? And how are they also addressing the impact that climate change is going to worsen in some of those vulnerable areas? And then there's an aspect of collaboration. Cities cannot do this on their own. So cities need to work in partnership with the private sector, with government, and also with communities, with young people. They need to work with women. So one of the dangers of our current society is that people on top make plans, and sometimes when we're making those plans, we don't understand the situation and the needs of the people that we're making the plans for. So through collaboration and social dialogue, that's when we need to work together with partners such as Gender CC to understand what are exactly the issues, so that we don't try and solve problems at a high level, whereas we don't understand what the real issues are. So that's one of the aspects that cities can focus on. And cities cannot do everything. So collaboration is important, to work with all the different stakeholders in the city to make sure that the transition is not just a transition, but it is a fair and equitable transition that actually solves some of the current vulnerabilities that we have in our cities and our local government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kodani. I am now wanting to give you an opportunity. We've heard from different perspectives. What is it that you would maybe want to comment or highlight, if any, from pulling all of this together in your head? What are the things that you think, as we leave here, having drawn lessons from cities, these are the things that, if we forget everything, we must not forget? Anyone would like to?
Thank you. I have a question for Happy rather than a comment. Happy, you spoke about governance structure and service delivery as critical enablers for the transition. And then Kodani mentioned collaborations. Given your role in BUSA, I just wanted to hear from you around how can the private sector play a bigger role in cities to support and work with cities to address those issues and to help cities in this transition?
No, thank you so much. Okay. My name is Dora Marema. I am the portfolio head for municipal sustainability at the South African Local Government Association. So the question that I have for the panel, and I think mostly for EarthLife and for Indalo and Gender CC, is having listened to the two mayors and to the Teboho giving the framing in terms of how just transition is envisaged to be implemented at the local government level, both for big cities and for smaller municipalities. How do you think civil society can be able to proactively collaborate and work together with municipalities to be able to achieve some of the things that we've been deliberating on? I'm saying this because I have been in civil society, and I know that there are some skills and some expertise that are sitting within civil society. And often municipalities are doing one thing and civil society is doing the other thing, but within the same communities. And how can we now start bringing the two together in a way that is going to enrich the life of the citizens of the municipalities?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, just as way of introduction, Zarina Mullah from C40.
My name is Lengwe. Hi, everyone. So my question is cities are already doing a lot of engagements. The mayor mentioned that there are a lot of platforms that she has set up at a city level where people come in and engage with her. But the Presidential Climate Commission is also doing some engagements as well around the just energy transition. And my fear is that people are getting tired of being engaged. Like there's too many people just coming in and saying, what do you think? What do you think? So how can you make sure that there aren't too many consultations and we all work together to have these consultations? And because some of the issues that I've heard around the Presidential Climate Commission consultation is that people then start coming in and talking about service delivery and all their problems, and they're not just discussing the just energy transition. So how can we collaborate with our stakeholder engagements so that we don't wear people out with all these consultations that we're having within our organizations? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll start with Happy. What can you bring as business into this?
It's a bit weird starting as the only man on the. It's weird, but yeah, sure. So what I can say is there's two aspects that business can do and is already doing. The first one is because of the situation of our local government, businesses are starting to have to take on more of the service delivery investments that are there in order to keep their own operations going, right? So what you're starting to see is that, let's say a water treatment plant is not working and there's a local industry in that particular area, in the business grouping, whether it's a forum or the actual company, will then put money, invest into that thing to work. But the core benefit is that it then allows the community, obviously, the use of that, and supposedly the municipalities then able to either rent some of the revenue that is coming out, or is able to structure some form of revenue collection. That's one way of a kind of an emerging partnership that's there, but it creates a path dependency that, you know, the obligations of local government are being shifted to business. We do need to get to a point where businesses are taking a certain level of responsibility in the midst of the externalities that we know are coming from the production of the different enterprises that we have. And part of that might be that, yes, business takes on greater targets on how much emissions they may reduce, but also how much they can invest in adaptation at a local level, which ensures that even the infrastructure that is there or the services that are there are also going to help the business to prosper and to grow, but also the communities to still maintain at least a level of access that would be otherwise lost if the businesses are not there. That's the one thing. The second thing, I think, which is more important, is that we need to be aligned in the trajectory of where the particular local community is going. What tends to happen is, whether it's a political situation or whether it's companies changing their agenda, you can't have a situation where you lose a primary employer just because you can't be at the same table. Right. And one example of this, there's a large sugar company that left KZN, not because they couldn't deliver on the key premise of the enterprise, but because the municipality couldn't give at least some time to the community and the business to even out some of the concerns that are there. So what business has been trying to do much more now is that through the organized business formations is to have those kinds of conversations to say what is necessary for business to continue, but what can business ensure that there is at least a good environment for that kind of conversation to happen. I think those are the two main things, without having a situation where you have corporate capture. Because it is a real thing and we have to be honest about it, but there are lines that can be drawn in that respect. And then lastly, I think on the conversation or on the situation of conversations, we can't stop talking about this thing. right? Because the problem is when we stop talking about it, the new innovations, the new solutions will then leave us behind. Why I say this is that some years ago, we were talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, how to implement those, how to mainstream those, and then we kept quiet about it. But the just transition is not anything new because it comes from amalgamation of those goals and how they manifest themselves in those different ways, as you explained in the different communities. So we have to keep on having this conversation, and people get tired of it. And then kids at a lower age, at 3 years old, are able to understand or kind of mute it out, then it becomes part of our life, because right now it's not. And until we get to the point where it's part of our life, then we can stop. But right now we shouldn't. We should just keep on going and let the progress and the conversation take us into the next direction.
Thank you very much. We are going to come to, I'll come back to you, Mayor. I want to go to Alison DeVille. One of the things that I'm hearing, and I'm going to link it to a question by Dora. One of the things that I'm hearing is that if there was ever a time where local government must fulfill one of its objects in South Africa, which object is to bring governance to communities and make sure that governance moves with communities. That's one of the things why local government exists in terms of the constitution. This is the time, because we are looking at really fundamentally transforming society, and we can't do that without moving with society. Now, I want to link that back to the question that Dora is asking. With that big endeavor of moving society with us, what is it from the point of view of an organization such as yours that you can bring to the table to make sure that you help local government to move together? You have made a point already that, among other things, ward councillors that are there must be empowered because they are an important interface with communities. But NGOs, civil society, what is it that you can bring so that we make sure that we don't leave anyone behind?
Thank you for that question. I think as civil society, we are doing a lot, especially at community level. And this is the time when we have to work together with government, not against each other. We are reaching out to government. She knows very well, she has been there, but in most cases, we don't get a positive response. I'll give you an example. The communities that we're working with on just transition in Orange Farm and in Eguhuleni. I hope Mayor is still here. But do have C40 members from Eguhuleni. We go and do workshops and do capacity building. And just to touch on Hlengiwe's question as well, communities, they understand these things, and they are now tired of having government or even society come to address them. Then it's a workshop, you feed them, you are gone. Nothing happens. Their situation doesn't change, instead it becomes worse. So what we're doing when we ask for funding is to make sure that when we raise awareness, we say we build capacity, we implement concrete projects that will help communities. The two communities I'm talking about, we have implemented a biogas digester, which is another source of a clean energy. And because of space, land issues, we're asking local schools if we can be able to use the space in the schools to implement a biogas digester and to start food gardens at school where community members can work there and can be able to help supply the harvest from their food gardens to the school feeding scheme. Now, what we normally do is to say, when we come to the communities, please invite all relevant stakeholders. If we know we're going to work with schools, we first go to the school principal, talk to the school principal, but we want the local ward councillor to be there. And in most instances, they are not there. Now it's a challenge for communities because as much as they have the issues that I mentioned earlier on, they are aware of environmental issues. They are aware that illegal dumping, the waste that is in their communities, adds to environmental degradation. Now they start cleaning campaigns to clean those areas, but they need the support of the local local ward councillor, because they clean today, the next day people come and dump. Something has to be done. That area, it has to be cordoned off, or they have to start food gardens or build skills centers, because that's what they lack. They want skills development centers. And another area, especially Eguhuleni, there's a river that the school children cross when they have to go to school. And it has become a health hazard and a life-threatening area because people are being killed and thrown in that river. Now they are cleaning that river. They try to approach the local ward councillor to say, we need a bridge for people to be able to cross over. They can't get hold of the ward councillors. These communities have started now to contribute a monthly fee so that they'll be able to buy each other solar panels. As a civil society who depend on funding, we can only do so much. We think we need partnership with the government to come and take over and help these communities to be able to take forward these projects that they are starting to contribute a little bit of money to pay for each, to buy solar panels for each household. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Hastings to, together with the mayors, pull this together. We have heard, we have listened. What does it mean?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can we just give the panel and Ntobeli a round of applause? Thank you so much. We have 5 minutes, and I would like to use that 5 minutes first to just ask Mayor, you have heard it all. Can you take 3 minutes of the 5 minutes and just give your reflections from where you are sitting? What does it all mean? Is it doable? The people want Wi-Fi in communities for just transition. Are you ready? Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Everything else happens at the local government level. All of us, we need to work together. We need to close the gap. We must stop working in silos. The challenge that we are facing in South Africa is one. There are some responsibilities in terms of the constitution that are relying with the province and the national, and funding therefore goes to province and national government. But at the end of the day, we as local municipalities, we are the one that are charged with the responsibility to render services in an effective and efficient manner. Maybe the district development model is going to be able to assist us to move forward, because the district development model has been introduced in the country. Now it will help all of us to come together, but that does not mean the IDP was failing. The IDP is not only a document that looks within the municipality, it looks even outside the municipality that is closer to that particular municipality. As you plan for your sister municipality and your own municipality. But in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that all of these things are doable if and only if the funding can be overhauled and be redirected to municipalities. And smaller municipalities must be treated equally. They must be given priority because climate change is felt at local municipalities. Business people must stop saying to us, we are unable to help you because you are small, you are unable to help you. We need capacity in local municipalities because it is very difficult to acquire skills that are based in cities. But we can do everything if and only if all of us, we bring our heads together and work together. There is nothing that local municipality can do because we are charged with the responsibility to make sure that we build the effective and efficient socio-economic development that is going to be just. And if just transition is not going to happen, all of us, we are going to fade away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If just transition is not going to happen in South Africa, all of us are going to fade away. To me, there is no other way. There's no other way to achieve equality in South Africa if the transition is not just. There is no other way to achieve energy security in South Africa if the transition is not just. Colleagues, we have come to the end of the session. COP is ending today. It has been quite a busy 2 weeks. It has been crazy, you agree with me, lots of meetings. But one thing that I am going with and that you should go with is, despite the slow pace of negotiations at the government level, there has been an increased momentum from subnationals, cities, local governments, private sector, civil society. There's been an increased momentum to do the right thing. One thing that we should go away with is the fact that there is a recognition that climate change is a human rights and a social justice issue. And if we are really to address climate change, just transition is key to correct the injustices that are brought by climate change. I would like us to go back to South Africa, colleagues, and I would like to also invite the partners that are in this room to support South African initiatives with speed, with diligence, and with commitment. With that, I would like to thank all of you for your participation. I would like to thank the people that are joining us online. Thank you so much for logging in. I would like to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for your insights and for your contribution. But most importantly, Mayor Campbell of Ekululeni and Mayor Pukutsi of Swalopele Municipality, thank you for your leadership. We don't have an excuse in South Africa to blame our inaction on lack of political will or political leadership, because you are the champions, because you have taken the mantle from President Cyril Ramaphosa, who started the Just Transition Commission, and you are taking it to the local level. Also, thanks to the representatives of the Just Transition, of the Presidential Climate Commission, for actually your contribution here. Can we just give us a send-off round of applause? And thank you so much for your attention.